Meeting is now live streaming. All right. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you guys for coming. This is our youth roundtable to essentially go over at the same time City of San Jose is having discussions about our 2020 and 2021 budget. This is almost going to be like our youth budget. What do we want to see in our community in the next few years? What's important for us to fund? So I thank you guys for jumping on and joining me on this. Starting with Angel, do you mind introducing yourself and we'll go from there?
Totally. Hi everybody, my name is Madero. I'm a District 6 resident. I live over by the Alameda, kind of like the border between District 6 and District 3, on Cleves or Park in there. What were the other questions? I graduated last June from UC Santa Cruz with my degree in politics and education. And then as of late, I've just been working on sorry, what were like the little bio questions?
We go through who you are, what your background was, why you got interested in politics, and then what your first impression of my campaign was, if that's something you're willing to answer.
Yeah, politics, just like coming from a minority background, it's just everything politics is personal. So I've just really decided to kind of integrate that into everything I do. And then education is also really important to me. So that's why I studied it. And then something that just jumped out at me from Jake's campaign was just like the transparency of like what you're about. I thought was really like cool. Yeah.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. And thank you for making the time to come on and talk with us.
Absolutely.
Hazel, would you mind going next, introducing yourself? Unless she froze, which does happen. Hazel, will come back to you. Jessica, would you mind giving a little introduction about who you are?
Yeah, I'm Jessica. I just graduated Wilgon High School and I'm going to go to UCSB next year. I kind of got involved into politics. I think like my freshman year of high school, I started doing mock trial and I got really involved with the law and stuff. And then this year I decided, after the Black Lives Matter movement came out, I kind of got a lot of like stuff going. I was like, there isn't much in Willow Glen of us speaking up, so I decided to kind of organize a protest, and then you spoke at my protest, and so that's, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you for the invite as well. It was in coordination with Gabriel on that. So Gabriel, do you mind going next, introducing yourself?
Problem. I'm Gabriel. Apologies if my connection is a little spotty right now, so if I freeze or stutter or stuff, it's not me, it's just the machine. But anyhow, I'm a lifelong resident of San Jose. I've lived in District 6 my whole life. I just graduated from Willow High School, same as Jess. And in the fall, I'll be going to Berkeley to study plant biology. I've been involved in politics mostly through like the Democratic Socialists of America chapter down here in San Jose, which I joined, I think, 2 years ago. And that's also how I got to know Jake, was through the endorsement of our chapter of his campaign back in like ages ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my background right here.
Appreciate it. Again, thank you for making time. Bianca, welcome.
Hello, my name is Bianca. I graduated from Notre Dame High School last year. I actually live in District 10. I live kind of near Oak Ridge Mall, but I work in District 6. So, and I have for about 3 years, and so does my mom. So I'm very closely connected with District 6. I go to Santa Clara. Currently, I just finished my freshman year. And that's how I heard about this meeting and about your campaign through Hawad. So I thought this, and as someone who's been politically active, I kind of, that died down a little bit when I went to Santa Clara. So I'm looking especially with the new fervor of movements that's going on, I thought this would be a cool opportunity to get involved and learn about some more stuff.
Awesome. Hazel, do we have you back yet? We'll give him one more minute. Hawad, want to introduce yourself? Always fun times working in different networks and getting these Facebook live streams going up. There he is.
I definitely want to defer to everybody else.
Always fun times working in different networks and getting these Facebook live streams going up. There he is.
Everybody else.
Always fun times working in different networks and getting these Facebook. Maybe with that, we'll pivot to Hazel, since it looks like you're back on. Mind introducing yourself?
My name is Hazel. I'm a junior at the University of Portland. I'm a double major in history and English, and I'm going to be applying to law school soon. I started getting into activism during the Women's March in 2016, but I was really inspired by my aunt, who was the first lesbian to get legally married in California. And that was really inspiring for me to see her do that in, a state where that hadn't been done before. The reason I love Jake Tonkel's campaign is because it makes environmental activism accessible and easy. And it shows you how important intersectionality is within environmental activism. I think you've done a very good job about touching on minorities' positions in environmental activism and promoting it throughout your campaign.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Hawad, do we have you in a spot to introduce yourself? All right, well, we'll see if he gets some connection back. But again, thank you everybody for jumping on. What I wanted to do today was talk about what does city budget look like for us, for people, the youth in our community, the youth in San Jose. I think we have a fairly different perspective, and I guess I would throw myself in there as a we. We're all in a space where what the next 30 years, what the next 50 years of City of San Jose look like is going to be really important. And wanted to just bring it to everybody's attention. We've certainly got a lot of publicity going on right now with the issues around racial justice and policing. So I would love to, start and get everyone's perspective on that. I'll open it up. Whoever has their first thoughts. Jessica, you mentioned you decided you wanted to organize something, so maybe we'll start with you.
Hi, sorry, my connection is a little spotty right now. So could you just repeat a little excerpt of what you just said?
Yeah. So first topic we jump into is around racial justice and policing. It's a big conversation going on right now at City Hall. In terms of the budget, and I want to make sure that we get a youth perspective on that. Jumping into the fact that you were instrumental in planning, Black Lives Matter protests in the heart of Willow Glen. What has come up for you emotionally through this process, through what we've seen over the last couple of weeks? And then what type of action are you looking for from the community and from elected officials?
Yeah, so police brutality isn't new. It's just kind of being brought to our attention right now because we have cameras and everyone can see it. So with that, I would like people, at least in Willow Glen, it's with the protests, I've had some backlash from people in Willow Glen, kind of don't bring this here, we don't want this here, go downtown. And it's I wish people be more open to what we're trying to say and what we're trying to get at, instead of just the protests that they see on TV with the rioting and such, because my protest was very peaceful and the energy was very positive. So in Willow Glen, I think people really need to just like take a second to really understand what we're trying to say.
And on how, being someone from, closer to downtown in the district, what are your thoughts?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, policing in general is just like the whole rhetoric around policing falls under like systems of oppression, like it's historical, there's like trauma to it. But then just to like add a little bit, I myself live in a home where like I have a diabetic father, my mother's older, so like I myself wasn't able to participate in marches and protests because of like fear of catching coronavirus or anything like that and bringing that back to my home. But I think part of like the whole conversation with policing, protesting is like, what I feel is lacking is this idea of creativity. So like personally, some things I set out to do are like, I bought supplies and I made Black Lives Matter posters that I've been like giving to, like reaching out on social media, like, hey, I have posters if you want to put this on your house. And like with the help of my friends, we created like these little informational flyers that we also translated into Spanish and are working to like translate to other languages as well, that we can like physically canvas with. But that conversation goes further onto like creativity of how to protest, but it's like the creativity of, I guess like the rhetoric behind policing doesn't necessarily have to be physical police. There's other ways to police, such as like, and I think Sam Liccardo and like the city has had good leadership in this, to where they have programs like Work to Future, which I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with, is like a private public partnership that puts youth in direct contact with companies that provide internships, paid internships at that. And then at the end, it just gives them really good job experience. There's that. It's just like, what else is there? There's the Work to Future, like other things. What's the other one? Oh, Vision Zero, for example, like helping cyclists, helping reduce like cyclist deaths and accidents and all that. Like if you can bolster these budgets and these programs that already kind of exist and are these like different avenues of how to in turn affect crime, that's like impactful in and of itself. Like other things I'm thinking about creatively that might also work with your environmental kind of take on politics is like making VTA and making transportation free. As of an article I read a year ago, but a San Jose Spotlight article, only 7% of the budget or of like income from VTA is from actual fares. And it's like, there can be a way to bolster that budget and figure it out so that transportation is free in San Jose. Like, and that could create really good avenues for like potential, like if you can't find a job because transportation is an issue, or it just like lowers costs of living really if transportation is free. And yeah, just really getting creative with these things, like investing in community gardens. There's other ways to police in a way that just, there just seems to be a lack of creativity or even a willingness to invest in programs that are already there that kind of channel that creativity. So I think this is an important conversation because a lot of us have seen different forms of like programs functioning and we've been part of that. But yeah, sorry, I spoke a lot.
I think those are some really interesting points that you bring up, Angel. I, for a while, was very passionate about issues of walkability and community building. And to be honest, I hadn't even thought about that in this context of police brutality up until this moment when you just said it. And fortunately, I was able to attend 2 conferences as a part of my high school that talk specifically about walkability, Vision Zero, all that stuff. So I think that I have to agree that that is there's a lot of potential there in multifaceted ways to open up new ways of policing, as you framed it, which is, you know, an awesome way of thinking about that. But also just building a better community. So I went to school in downtown San Jose, and I work in Willow Glen. And it takes me like 30 minutes to get from Willow Glen to San Jose. And I took the light rail because, you know, my principles, right? I was like, I can't own a car. I have to take public transportation. So I had a light rail and a little like Razor scooter that I would use. And it's just, the transportation situation in San Jose is abysmal. And like, I think that is not, like, most people don't even think about it because we're such a car city that, like, the implications of that alone are just crazy, right? And especially in an area like District 6 that has great walkability in, you know, the downtown area. It has this beautiful downtown, but it's so inaccessible. It's a mile away from the nearest light rail station. Like, why is that? And why does it take, you know, like 15 to 30 minutes for you then to get from this transportation hub to, you know, a downtown area that where people congregate? It's just, you know, it's insane. And you know, having to commute from Santa Clara to Willow Glen, which is 4 miles, you know, that was just, again, insane. And it was quicker for me to take a bike between those two. It only took 30 minutes. But if I was to take the bus, it would have taken 40 minutes, right? Like, so it's just a whole mess. And I think that is a really important, that in itself, that creative thinking is what we should be talking about here. And that, from my own lived experience with the transportation system in San Jose, like, I agree, that needs to be prioritized greatly.
While everyone was talking, I was thinking about last week I went on the community comment for the city council meeting, and they were talking a lot about like the funding for police. And most people on the call, I think about like 200 people called, and I would say like at least 80% were calling for defunding the police. So it was an incredible call. But towards the end, our mayor and the rest of the city council were bringing up the fact that San Jose itself has one of like the smallest police departments for like a city of its size in the country, which I think is very funny because the logic from there is that, like, okay, let's look at cities like New York, which have like massive police forces, and that doesn't work. And what we have doesn't work. So maybe it is like the creative solutions that Bianca and Angel were talking about that actually can like cause like fix issues within the community that lead to like crime or whatnot, instead of putting more money into police departments, which we only have like effects that'll happen with like what's in New York, where you have a bloated police department with dubious inside culture.
Yeah, I think the creativity perspective and then the understanding of what are we willing to tackle, right? I think as a future generation of leaders, a lot of us try and think about these problems in a way where it's like, when I'm old and I have, grandkids, do I want the problems to just be a little bit less bad, or do I want them to disappear? And do I want to have fixed this? And I think, passing it over to Hazel a little bit, like environment, quality of life, policing, all of those things kind of go together. What does a long-term perspective from a youth perspective look like when the city of San Jose is looking at a budget for next year, right? For the end of this year and for the budget of next year, what kind of things are we looking at funding?
Yeah, so I was also watching the San Jose City Council meeting this week and last week, and a lot of what I heard, especially from Sam Liccardo, was that the county has already implemented a program to try and pair a social worker with a police officer for every dispatch call, but it failed because they weren't able to hire enough social workers who are willing to go on those calls. But I think that we need to look in the direction of where San Francisco has gone. And I think we do that a lot in our history, of not even sending the police for non-criminal calls when it's only about the homeless, or it's only about, you know, a mental health issue or a non-violent community issue. We should only be sending health workers, because then we permanently eliminate the chance for, you know, a violent response from a police officer, and we can immediately de-escalate the situation because we're not sending an armed person to a non-violent situation.
And just finish that thought up a little bit. What good does it do us in the long run when someone other than an officer might show up? You know, if we're sending a mental health professional, my assumption would be we're trying to create a system where then you have multiple contacts. That person now has access to resources, has access to a social worker that they can, you know, meet with on a regular basis to really solve, you know, what the root cause of that problem was. But I think it's a really good point. We have to discuss the stark difference between band-aiding things and solving, you know, our greatest issues as a city.
Yeah, this is something that, I don't know if you know Judge Manley. He works for the Santa Clara County District Court, and he's really great. He only refers his people who come to his court who have been nonviolent to social services, especially if their crimes are related to, you know, over drinking, drugs, or homelessness. Because when you arrest a homeless person who might be causing a public disturbance for being drunk or on drugs, you put them in the drunk tank, and then what? You release them back into the same environment. But if we're dispatching social workers, you give them access to programs, you pair them with somebody that they're very unlikely to fear in the future, and you're connecting them with a whole network of social services that will prevent this from happening, and help them, you know, recover and try and get sober or get out of this cycle of homelessness and drug abuse. Not to say that all homeless people are you know, on drugs. That's not true. But a lot of what we are seeing in the courts right now, especially from downtown San Jose, are people being arrested for public disturbances because they're drunk, because they're homeless, because they're on drugs. And if we stopped dispatching police officers and we started sending social workers, I think that would be eliminated entirely.
Yeah, and we're getting a question from the live feed that I think it will kind of make an interesting pivot for this too. It's talking about specifically education. I mean, you're all still in school, studying at some level. What types of avenues through, again, your activism, through your education process, have then touched on, you know, issues of budgeting and issues of policing for that matter? You know, how do we deal with that in an educational structure? Or how would you like us to deal with it?
Well, I think, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
No, go right ahead, Gabriel, please. You started first.
I'm sorry. I bet actually Angel could probably talk about this as well, because I was thinking about what happened to the grad students striking at UCSC, and how they had the local police were surveilling them because of their calls for an increase in like a cost of living adjustment, so they could continue to live in Santa Cruz, where like here, where it's exorbitant to actually like rent a place, and they just wanted to continue like learning and teaching at the university, but had like a pretty severe crackdown by campus police. So I think like a good step in the right direction is to limit like contracts with like campus police. We've seen that happen with that was like one of the first organizations to divest and like remove themselves from the Minneapolis police was the university in Minneapolis. So I think a similar reaction is a good idea for like education in general to move.
I totally agree with that statement. I just also wanted, like, I actually wrote about like the crossroads between education and politics as my senior paper. So like what I wrote about a lot is like using education as a way to create consciousness and really like reinforce certain ideas. And I took like case studies from like different places, like, but one that was in particular was Mexico City. They have actually bike share programs where they like subsidized bikes. You pay like a certain amount for it. You do pay for the bike, but it's like relatively cheaper. And they teach you how to care for it. They teach you like bike laws, and they have like these bike share programs as well. So that's like, it's almost like workshops. It's creating these workshops within the city that would arguably be part of like the public library's budget, where you could like have like a really well advertised. And I think that's one of the biggest things, like advertising and really sending these ideas or these like workshops to like the communities that might need it the most. But like how to build a resume workshop, how to interview workshops. And I know a lot of people have these, but it's just like not very well known. But like, have you guys ever seen those like signs on like the billboard that says, let's say like San Jose recycles clean or something like among those lines? Like just upon seeing that, like, what does that mean? Like, no, like, what does that mean? I mean, I researched it, and what it means is like cleaning, like rinsing out your bottles, sorting your stuff. But there should be like, I don't know, like a little commercial or something, like a little cartoon commercial. Like, have you guys seen that really cute Sesame Street commercial, like how to wash your hands? Like something like that, that is like registered. I think there should be like some budget for like advertising education. And like, there's so many ways you could go about creatively having these workshops, these like spaces where these ideas can be like championed and really like sent home.
I think on a related note too, when I heard education, my mind instantly went to public schools. And I mean, I went to private high school, but I went to public middle school and elementary school. And it just, you know, the lack of resources, you feel it, especially having gone from a public school setting to a private school setting. It is, you know, it's there. And I'm sure we all know that because, you know, public school, right? And I saw a statistic recently that was the average San Jose police officer makes twice as much as the average San Jose Unified Public School teacher, which is just, it's hard, right? To visualize that. My mom was a public school teacher for 6 years or so, right? And that teachers cannot, it's not a sustainable position to have a teacher's salary, a public school teacher salary. And, but these are the people who are building up our young people, and like people who are constantly underpaid and doing these hard jobs, you know. It is so hard to be a public school teacher, and they're just not paid enough. Like, how can we keep asking them to do that and then expect things, you know, to come out of public schools in this way? Like, I don't know, it just doesn't seem fair for that statistic didn't seem right to me.
Anybody else have a comment off of that? I know we've got, you know, a couple of you in public school right now, some off to college. What were your experiences like in that same space?
I went to Lincoln High School, which is a public high school in San Jose. And my entire high school experience, as well as middle school, I went to Hoover Middle School. I found it really disheartening that there were no mental health professionals on campus. And if there were, my senior year, we finally got a mental health professional for students who were having issues at home or going through a mental health crisis, whatever that may be. There was one of them, and there was one college career counselor, and 2,000 of us, 3,000 of us. And so there were really no resources for students who were having a lot of trouble at home, who couldn't sit through class. And it wasn't because they weren't intelligent or capable or bright students. It was that they were going through this crisis and there was nobody for them to talk to. There was nobody, especially when they are undocumented, and a lot of Lincoln students are. That's a big mental health weight on your shoulders. There's no one there to help you walk through the college application process. And so I saw a lot of bright students drop out of high school or not continue into college even though they wanted to, because there was nobody to assist them through that.
Yeah, to like piggyback off of what Hazel said, I went to public school my whole life. At Willow Glen, the resources for mental health were available, but it didn't seem like it was openly available for everyone. It was kind of almost like it's invite only, which is almost, it's weird because you'd think that they would advertise for an open, like, if you need help, come here, we'll help you, but it's not like that, at least with my experience. So if we could kind of change that and also give the public schools the resources to do that, it would be beneficial for a lot of students at school.
Yeah, I have a friend who, because we both good at both good at Willow Glen, who at Willow Glen 2 years ago, and when they like finally realized that she was like putting in all these requests, they realized that like, oh wow, something is really, really off. So their solution wasn't like, they still didn't have like the personnel to like get her to talk with the counselor. So the solution was just to have her reduce like her number of classes.
Didn't quite catch the end of that. You mind giving it a minute and then repeating the sentence?
And then yeah, that's what came of that.
We'll see if Gabriel
of course, sorry.
There you go.
Okay, wait. My friend, she oh, am I good?
I'm not sure.
I don't know.
We might have lost you, so
I think I'm gonna disappear. I don't know.
Just we'll see if it comes back around. I'll use the opportunity to pivot slightly. We're going through, like I said, this time where youth are becoming more and more engaged in the political process. This, is specifically a big piece of that. How do we advocate, and how do you advocate for yourselves on a city and a school level to make sure that resources are there, that are preventative, that are productive, right? We have a question that falls along that lines. John asks, the youth and young adults are usually ignored by many politicians. How are all of you encouraging the rest of your community to go out, engage in politics, vote, become organizers, whatever it is that they feel is a passionate way to make a difference?
I mean, I think just one of the best ways to do this is having really candid, maybe even uncomfortable conversations about like what voting means. Like for like a lot of times people would say to me like, oh, I don't really pay attention to politics, but it's like being a minority, like I don't have the benefit to not. It's like, that's my livelihood. That's everything that I could, like, there's risks to not being political. It's just like, so just being really candid with these conversations, reaching out to your neighbors. Like as of the other day, I took out my big ladder and I put up a Black Lives Matter sign on the telephone pole outside my house. And like 2 or 3 of my neighbors came out like while I was doing so, and they were like, oh, I support that. That's really cool. That's amazing. So now I could really reach out to them as well and like have those conversations and know that my neighbors support me and there's like a community there as well.
I think also like having those difficult conversations are really important. As a white person, talking to your older white family about the Black Lives Matter movement can be difficult and uncomfortable. It seems like whenever white people talk about race, they get defensive, and I'm not racist, you know, is their initial reaction to the conversation. When in actuality, if we had changed that to being open to like listening to what people had to say and understanding and kind of getting new perspectives on racism, because it's not just a single event, it's a system. And if white people specifically, were more open to that, then it would be very beneficial. And I think that starts with talking to your family members, even if it's uncomfortable, it's going to be hopefully productive, and your friends too, so.
I'm a big book person, and books are my job at the moment. So as a kind of not an expert, but as someone who's knowledgeable in that field, I'm constantly asking people for recommendations of books that I can read in order to improve my understanding of these issues, as well as recommending books that I've read that I can share, in school, on my own. And I'm a history student at Santa Clara at the moment, and just sharing like readings too, excerpts from things that I've read, especially because I think what is really interesting about this whole thing is there is a dominant narrative, and we're kind of picking away at that. But in this moment, we still have to kind of uphold different voices and, diversify our own understandings and question everything, really. Because you have to question what is being told to you and kind of seek out information on your own. And I've said this before, and like I'll say it again. There's this one reading that I really like. I recommend everyone read it, especially white people. It's called The Pitfalls of White Liberalism. It's written by Stokely Carmichael during the Civil Rights Movement, and it is just so you call yourself out when you're reading it, even if you. Yeah, especially if you think that you are a white liberal, like, you need to read this. So,
could you say the name of the book one more time?
Yeah, it's an essay, and it's called The Pitfalls of White Liberalism. So it's like 3 or 4 pages, not a whole ton of commitment, but it will change your perspective on a lot of things and equip you for a lot of tough conversations in the future as well.
Bianca, I would love, just a quick question to you about that. In that, essay, what is it that you see that also needs to be done by our elected leaders to reflect on their own, perhaps white liberalism or whatever form of mostly white political policy they tend to identify with?
Yes. What I think we can apply politically is, especially because these laws are written by people. We're talking to other people who have implicit biases, and especially what this essay breaks down, which I think is so awesome, is the fact that when you are a liberal white person, or a liberal and a liberal person, sometimes you feel that you're in the right, and that's kind of it. You're like, I agree with this. Like, Black lives do matter, right? And that's kind of where you can call it a day, and you can do this kind of surface level work that, it's like a value signaling thing. You're championing the values that you stand for, but you're not really acting upon them, and not taking into account different perspectives and more nuanced things, especially with a lot of more controversial topics. It is very easy for people to pick up a black and white perspective and think, I disagree with this, I don't agree with that. But it is, as we've learned, a lot more complicated. And I think that is what is important, is looking at how what we thought we knew was different, and taking concrete action rather than just proclaiming your beliefs, which, you know, is the easy thing to do. So doing the things that are really hard.
Does anybody have a follow-up to that?
Yeah, so I'm almost done with this book. It's called White Fragility. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. Yeah, it's a great book. And some of the questions that they ask you, or the author asks you in the book, is kind of like recognizing your subconscious prejudice. And it's, everyone has it. It's ingrained in us in society. So so your first thought in any prejudice or discriminatory situation where you might think about a certain way about someone that you don't know. And then your second thought should be, wait, why did I think like that? And kind of change it. If you actively look for those and recognize those times when you're making assumptions about people that you don't know, it's very beneficial. And then I've even seen it in myself, and I've seen it in other people. It's kind of just taking a second to like think about really what your society has kind of trained you to think, and stereotypes and such.
One more thing that this isn't exactly related to what Jessica just said, but the essay that I'm talking about, it also kind of broadens our perspective on what violence is, which I think is really interesting. There's this amazing quote from it that I cannot remember exactly, but it says, "Is it not violent for a child to go to bed hungry in the most wealthy country in the world?" And you guys might have read that before. And I think that kind of points to the deeper rooted issues with this. Like, yes, we were talking about police brutality, but we're also talking about, in this moment, we need to be talking about the ingrained systemic discrepancies that have resulted in our current situation and are going to perpetuate things even once we've, moved on from this image of immediate violence. How are people, are people being fed? Are the people, do they have water? Do they have healthcare? All that stuff. And I think that is also something that we really need to be thinking about.
Yeah, I think that's a super important point, because that brings me to our budget. What types of violence are we trying to stop within our community? What are our priorities for our neighbors, family, friends, for our city, when talking about the very different types of violence? Hunger, fear of being undocumented and deported, fear of eviction, fear of job loss. Those types of things all can perpetuate different types of violence, different hardships on people. And right now we're trying to figure out what that balance is. When we talk about the $1 billion that the city of San Jose has in its general fund, it's hard for a lot of people to know, what can we really get done with that? Where does it go? But through all of your organizing activism, what have you guys seen so far from the city of San Jose in terms of its priorities, and what you think needs to be funded less and what you think needs to be funded more?
I personally think that the city's actually been doing a really good job with the way that they're reworking zoning, so that there can be like alternative forms of housing. And I think that's it's a really big conversation that is had here in San Jose, because housing shortages, just the ridiculous amount of money you need to have to exist in this space, has just run out a lot of just people, and like normally minorities. But I think also has a massive environmental aspect to it, which I'm thinking of relating to coming into the summertime, and last year how there was PG&E blackouts, brownouts, and most of those areas consisted of East Side. Like, it's like we never had a blackout here in District 6, I don't think. Maybe brownouts, maybe occasional, but I don't remember PG&E shutting off electricity here in District 6. So it's like a broader conversation of zoning laws. And what I've had this idea for a while, and I think it has a cute little catchy name. I call it Solar System San Jose. It also I love alliteration, so I think that works great. It also works in Spanish, Sistemas Solares San Jose. But it's like the way I think of it, and there's money for it. It would be, or I think there's money for it, hopefully. It's a private-public partnership with solar companies so it battles inequity, it battles what is energy independence for cities, which is like a real big issue coming like in now, is this idea of energy independence, especially with PG&E going bankrupt and like all the things we've heard in the news about PG&E. But it'd be a public-private partnership with solar companies to invest in solar energy for lower income homes in specifically East Side, but it would also like trickle down to other areas so that there could be solar energy as an alternative that would also then in turn affect cost of living, because if you're not really putting money, if you're not paying a lot of money for energy, that also lowers rent or it frees up money for other things.
I know that there have been initiatives in like the last year working on transportation in the city of San Jose. Yes, there has been increased frequency, I believe, of like bus and light rail systems like that. And there's some new language around that where we have like the blue line now and the green line and whatnot, you know, which is cool. I have used the bus since then, and it's been okay. Still not awesome, but I do think that transportation is something that we really need to be focusing on, especially in light of the current pandemic, which you know, is a respiratory virus. And in San Jose, we have so many cars on the road. We have traffic and all this stuff. I live really close. I'm sure you guys can hear the freeway in the back of my video, but you know, we have all this stuff with emissions and traffic and, you know, just people not being able to get where they need to go. Like, that is just so simple, but like, it's not, you know, why aren't we fixing that? And why aren't we doing, and there has been some stuff, but I don't think it's been enough to, you know, get people where they need to go, take a significant amount of cars off the road to decrease the emissions within our own city, and, you know, making our air better on a more basic level.
Hazel, do you mind if I pass it to you? I mean, Bianca touched on a little bit of then environmentalism and how we need to start addressing that in transportation sectors, but you'd mentioned intersectionality in the environmental movement, and I would love to see what that looks like for you in terms of, you know, spending, in terms of priorities for us as a city.
Yeah, so I'm going to hop back to what Angel said. I agree that the city's done a very good job of trying to make as much affordable housing as possible as the budget will allow. But when I go to visit this affordable housing, whether I'm with a volunteer group or whether it's with a campaign I'm working on to check it all out, it primarily seems to be in very polluted heavy areas. So areas near freeways, areas where there's usually a bus stop, which is good, but there's a lot of issues with affordable housing being in zones where it's very noisy, with you know, noise pollution or air pollution. And I think if we're gonna make affordable housing sustainable and make it a place where people want to go, we also have to think about the health effects that it'll have living there, especially if the materials that we're using to make these buildings aren't sustainable, if they're in places where, you know, later on it can cause asthma with their kids, the kids of the residents there, if it can cause lung cancer, which we know is very much related in people who live near freeways or very traffic heavy areas. So while I do think it's great that affordable housing is popping up, it seems to be in locations which aren't great for their mental health or their physical health. And I think that needs to be very much included in the conversation.
Yeah, I think that's a huge piece of what changing the city looks like, at least for me personally. I mean, last week, City Council discussed the Charcot extension. It was, additional lanes over by Orchard School, over on, the northeast side of the city. And the project had been, in the works for years and went through all its approval process. And we're sitting now, today at a point where we know it has impacts to lung health, respiratory issues among those students. What type of leadership are you looking for to be able to say, yeah, we know we put that in writing 10 years ago, but we've learned, and this is where we need, a quick, bold change to get to the city that you want in the future?
I think it would be nice to treat, I mean, we're not saying that the city council has done a bad job or that this was, purposely intended to harm the residents of these buildings, but I think we should treat it much like we treat city budgets. So once we learn something new and we know now that this causes respiratory health issues, we put it in writing saying in the future, when we continue to build affordable housing, we're going to take into consideration the location of this housing, and we're going to make sure to the best of our abilities, it's not in an area which has high pollution rates, high vehicle traffic. We can't, really change what's already been done, but we can commit in writing and verbally and hold ourselves accountable to make sure that it's not going to happen again.
And then just in general, San Jose is such an interesting city too, because it's developed horizontally as opposed to vertically. Like where you see cities like Seattle that can go all the way up. They can you can have these huge high rises, these massive buildings. San Jose has that issue because of the airport, but it's also like a convenient, like the airport's right there. It's very locally centered, that it creates like this horizontal city that just has its own facet of problems. Like that's why police are stretched so thin, because they have to cover so much ground. That's why resources, transportation is so difficult here. Things like VTA it sounds so archaic. Like we're one of the only major cities that has light rail systems. Light rail systems are, like, compared to other forms of transportation, they're not very functional. They take a lot to develop, and they're just not that functional in general. But I think that whole idea, the whole housing conversation really goes hand in hand with transportation, and you have to really develop these systems, these structures of like transit-oriented development, where you put these like low-income communities or housing near transportation, so it's very easy. And you also have to like advertise it. Like you can't just have something and not advertise it and then expect people to know about it, and then they're not going to use it. And then a year later, when you come out with figures of usage, nobody's used it. So your argument is nobody's used it, so why have it? And then like you delete it. It's like, no, just it's a whole thing. You can't just throw stuff out there. And I don't know if San Jose they have advertisements, but it just doesn't seem in the same. I don't really see it. It's interesting. Maybe that's a whole different conversation, but because we have these programs, there are these things that just people don't know about them.
I want to throw it to Gabriel, who is keeping his video off, so hopefully his audio is a little better, for some of our last thoughts. So we're coming up on 5 o'clock here, and see where he wants to take us.
So I was just thinking, because we've been talking about housing a lot, and I think a lot of the issues our city faces are like at their root due to housing injustices. But I was thinking about community land trust, which I know is a thing that Jake has in his policy. And can someone correct me? Does San Jose currently have any land trusts, like community-run land trusts?
No.
I don't.
We
Yeah, I don't
have
think we do.
an organization that is working on getting land to start one.
Well, I think a good idea is like to push that organization and like because I was thinking about the like back in January, if anyone can remember January or whatever, there was the incident that the Moms for Housing had in Oakland, where riot police like showed up to evict like young mothers and children from a home in Oakland. And I remember like waking up in the morning because this had all happened in like the middle of the night, being like horrified about that. Because again, like the issues we face, bringing it back to like police and whatnot, sending police in doesn't help, right? It's just an use of violence to enforce like a status quo. But then, luckily for the Moms for Housing, they had such a large outpour of support from like groups like the PSL and the DSA and East Bay and other like groups within Oakland coming to support them, that they were able to stick out through that night and end up getting that house into like a community land trust, where now the people who were like squatting and like trying to like keep their home still have a home. And I think that is a way to move away from like having to worry about like putting it back into the hands of the community, is a way for us to ensure that the community's like needs are met, because they will meet their own needs. They will guide themselves to what they need, right?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, and we'll have to wrap it up. I want to give you all about 30 seconds to say whatever last thoughts are on your mind here. But hopefully, and we'll have more of these coming up, maybe taking on some specific topics a bit more in depth. So thank you all, and last thoughts from everybody. Angel, you want to start us off on last thoughts?
Totally. Okay. Just fabulous conversation. I think it's like, this is so like cool to see all of like us really coming together and having this conversation. I don't know, just to follow up, I have the PDF available of the little flyers I'm making. I'm also gonna start like a little canvassing thing together sometime soon, so I can distribute these to communities, and like you can canvas your own community. I have Spanish, I have English. If you want to reach out to me, I have the PDF available. Just send me an email and I'll shoot that over.
Awesome. Jessica.
Yeah, guys, that was a great conversation. I really appreciate all the different perspectives and such. And yeah, I also have this. It's a pamphlet. It's about ending white silence, and it's kind of like why we protest in Willow Glen. So if you guys want to read this, contact me. I can give you that information. Just like educating yourselves and people around you, and like making sure that you're having difficult conversations. Right now is the time to do it, because it's it's happening right now. So yeah.
Thank you, Jessica. Hazel.
Yeah, I really loved this conversation. It was very nice to be a part of it. I hope you guys all remember to vote and to go register to people to vote, because that's really what is going to change a lot of things, making sure that Jake is elected, because that's extremely important. I'm also working for the Dave Cortese for California State Senate campaign. I'm a deputy organizer. He's a great candidate. So if you ever need help registering people to vote, like the materials, the pamphlets, the flyers, whatever you need, I'm totally into that, and I'd be happy to help you guys in any way.
Awesome, Hazel. Thank you. Bianca.
It was really nice to meet you all. This was a really great conversation to have, especially on a summer break when we can feel a little bit isolated. It was really nice to kind of keep this fervor going, and enlightening to talk to a bunch of different people about things that are happening locally within our own city, and inspiring ways to enact change, maybe on a big level, but also locally in our own individual lives.
Thank you for coming. Gabriel, last closing remarks, and then we'll jump off here.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening. Thank you for talking. This has been really fun. I really just have to say, like, I want to plug the South Bay Mutual Aid Network. If you need assistance during this coronavirus like lockdown, I think there's a website right now, so go check that out. And if you're also able to help and provide volunteer with the program, do that as well. That'd be great.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for coming. We will please find this live stream on Facebook, comment with a way for people to get in touch with you for all the different work that you're all doing. Same for everybody else watching. If you've got questions for me, feel free to reach out. If you want to set up another discussion panel, you guys have topics that you're interested in hearing from me or any of these amazing youth panelists, shoot us a comment as well, and we'll try and get something set up in the future. All right, take care, everybody.